Well, hello, you. Let's talk about minor scales, shall we? So you've gone through all the primary major scales and you're ready to start working on the secondary majors and the minor scales. Just like the major scales, the primaries are split into primary and secondary categories too. So what we're going to do is we're going to intersperse the secondary major scales with the primary minor scales. And we're going to do it in an interesting sort of way. So here's the order that we're going to use to intersperse those scales. This is all covered in more detail in the videos that are going to follow and in the articles below. So you can click the link in the description to get to there. So here the major scales are in purple, the minors are in black. So we start off with the secondary yellows, then we're going to do the open and first finger natural minors, go to secondary green, second and third natural minors, secondary blue, all the primary melodics, secondary red, all the primary harmonics, then all the secondary minors. Now keep in mind, this is over the course of, weeks/months that you're gonna do this. It's not like boom, 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 boom. Now we're gonna talk in more detail about how we split up the minors. The secondary scales were, of course, their own video, which you can watch over there somewhere. So like I said, the minor scales also have their own primary, secondary division, and we're gonna teach those a little bit differently. They're divided along the same lines as the major scales, with the friendlier, more resonant keys being the primary, and the ones that are a little bit less so being the secondary. But we're going to teach them in a different order than we did the major scales. So for those primary scales, we're going to split them up by the different forms of minor, and we're going to walk up the fingerboard with one form at a time. So we're going to start natural. We're going to teach the open string naturals, first finger naturals, second, third finger naturals. And then we'll move on and do the same thing with the melodic and then the harmonic. So we're walking up the fingerboard the entire time. And the reason I go from the natural to the melodic is for the finger patterns. When I told my best friend, who's a fantastic flutist, that this is the order that I teach the scales in, she was like, why would you do melodic before harmonic? You only change one thing here. And there's a lot of stuff going on with the melodic. Why would you do that first? And the reason is because of the finger patterns. The melodic scales all use those four basic patterns that the student is already going to be familiar with from doing the major scales and the natural minor scales. The harmonic, on the other hand, are going to use the extension patterns that are covered in Fingerboard Geography. This lovely book right here. So there are four extension patterns that need to be covered before you can do the harmonic scales because of the step and a half between the 6th and 7th scale degrees. So I find for the most part, it's easier to do the melodic first than the harmonic because they have a better understanding of those finger patterns. Now, if you have a student who the finger patterns don't work as well for as just simple scale degrees, if they're much more scale oriented than they are finger pattern, hand frame sort of stuff, feel free to swap them. It's up to you. The important thing is to isolate the three different forms and walk up the fingerboard first. The secondary scales, on the other hand, we're going to walk up the fingerboard, but we're going to do all three forms of the minor at once. So we're going to start with the first finger scales because for the secondary, there aren't any that start on an open string. We're going to start with the first finger scales. You're going to do the natural, melodic, and harmonic all at once. So you'll start with E flat minor there, and you'll do E flat natural minor, E flat harmonic minor, E flat melodic minor, or, flop the order. Again, it's up to you and what works better for your student. So you do all three forms of the first finger scales, then you do all three forms of the second, all three forms of third, all three forms of fourth, and then you can play every scale in first position. In every key. It's fantastic. The last thing I have to mention before we start diving into more detail on these guys is that the minor scales are going to use more than one finger pattern. For the major scales, whenever they had a 1 octave scale, it was just going to be in that one color, and then you stitched it together for 2 octaves. For the minors, even a 1 octave is going to have more than one pattern. But they still follow the same order of all the first finger ones match, all the second finger ones match, all the third finger, so on and so forth. So in the next video, which you should do the subscribing and the liking so that you know when that's coming, we're going to talk about the primary natural minors. It'll be a grand old time. Join us then.